Hey, good afternoon, fellow YouTubers. So, I kind of wanted to make a video about Chuck Jines. So I did say I would just leave him alone and I wouldn't make any videos about him. But, I watched this one doctor that is a psychologist and analyzes people. And he doesn't do it from a place of negativity, but he is a psychologist, and he, just gives his psychological breakdown of people. I have several degrees in psychology. I have a BA from undergrad in psychology, and I have 2 masters in psychology. And I've been working in psychology for 26 years. So I kind of, without any negativity, Chuck Jines is a very interesting individual. And so, but then again, he's also someone that seems to have like some issues. Definitely likes to stir the pot. I don't think anyone would question that. But I thought, it'd be kind of fun just to talk about Chuck Jines as an individual. What do we know about him? What do we not know about him? What can we speculate about him? So, very interesting guy, right? But he's got some controversial standpoints and ways of looking at things, which can cause people not to like him, can cause people to want to get into confrontations, so on and so forth. So I thought first let's just mention some things that we know about Chuck, good old Chucky. So he's 53. He was raised in a wealthy family. He loves blue-collar workers. He dislikes upper middle class and upper class individuals. He did some roofing. He thinks African Americans are very low intelligence. He considers the vast, this is not judgmental. These are just facts that we know about Chuck. He considers the vast majority of individuals in America to be low intelligence. And even the world, I think, for that matter. Whenever he discusses his grandfather, pretty much without fail, in my opinion, he gets very emotional. And he was really a big-time photographer for a while. Okay, there's other things we could say that we definitely know about him, like he's smart, he's articulate. He's had probably, at least most likely, some association with motorcycles throughout most of his adult life. He kind of broke away from, I'm sure he broke away from his family's agenda that they had for him and wanted for him, and tried to pursue his own, which led to more blue-collar work and roofing. Okay, let's look at some speculative things. Okay, so PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome. Is that more so from his one experience working with, in Chicago, the heroin addicts, homeless heroin addicts, and doing photojournalism on that? Or is it a lot to do also with his childhood? I think most people don't get PSD just from a job. I mean, I've worked in inner city ghettos for 26 years, and I don't think that has caused me PTSD. So I don't really know if just interviewing these people on heroin that are homeless would cause PTSD. Now, I think PTSD in children from wealthy families due to neglect is something that's much more common. And if that was the case, that could help explain why he gets so emotional whenever he mentions his grandfather. I think he may have felt neglected by his parents. He said both his parents worked. He said every morning, he said he'd always see his father looking dead tired, shaving in the morning and getting ready to go off to do the whole thing again. And just as a very young child saw that and realized, I don't want that. That's like, being part of the rat race, being imprisoned in your own cell of your own making, and he didn't want that. But it's in that environment where, both parents are very busy and you're trying to keep up with the Joneses. Anytime you're in upper middle class or upper class, everything is about image. And how do we compare with neighbors on the right of us and neighbors on the left of us? How do we compare with the friends that we're inviting over? Do we have the furniture that fits the image we're trying to portray? So, all that stuff gets really murky and kind of removed from the real things that are more important in life and in relationships and in seeking happiness. So, he may have felt neglected, and then from there, was able to bond with this older gentleman, his own grandfather, and then possibly out of that, really gain a respect for veterans. His grandfather was a veteran, and blue-collar workers. Now, I don't know if he's ever said what his grandfather did, but I know his parents were more white-collar, and I think that maybe his grandfather was blue-collar. So parents are white-collar, neglected him. Grandfather was blue-collar, bonded with him. That could explain that hatred of wealthy individuals. Maybe hatred's a strong word. Dislike, and more of a real appreciation and a gravitation and and he just likes those blue-collar workers much, much more than any white-collar worker. So that's speculative, but I think that could explain something, because he gets very emotional anytime he mentions his grandfather. And I think it comes from a special place, like he really had a bond with him, I'm feeling, and wish that he had more of a bond with his parents. But maybe, it sounds like he had a lot of siblings and both parents were working, and so it was probably hard to vie for any attention or time with those busy white-collar parents of his. Okay, so he has COPD. I feel like most people his age, if they just enjoyed marijuana, they wouldn't have COPD. A lot of people say marijuana is more, doesn't really cause as much lung damage as lung irritation, whereas tobacco causes lung damage and lung irritation. So if you're smoking marijuana over the long haul, like years, decades, it's not as likely to cause COPD, at least from what I've read, as opposed to tobacco. Worst case scenario would be to be smoking both. So I had a friend in high school, Robert Smith. Maybe I shouldn't have said his name, but it's such a common name, generic. I mean, that's like John Smith. But he was in junior college, living down here in San Pedro, and I'd come visit my best friend from high school that was living with him. And, I felt bad for the guy, because he was always smoking one of the two. He was smoking nonstop all day long, so it was either tobacco or marijuana. And I felt bad, because, his poor lugs, he would just finish a big bong load, and then he'd light up a cigarette. And then when he'd finish the cigarette, he'd smoke a bong load. And then when he'd finish the bong load, he'd smoke a cigarette. I just felt bad for those lungs of his. I mean, just no break, I'm not saying Chuck Jines did that, but he always, in a couple videos, mentioned how, the black guys would take a cigar, a blunt, and empty out all the tobacco from the inside and put the marijuana on the inside and then re-roll it up, and you got kind of the best of both worlds. It's really popular in England. They love, they call them fags, rolling a cigarette had a tobacco hand-rolled cigarette and putting in some hash, though, instead of marijuana. But, so I'm thinking that he may have just smoked a little bit too much of both, because he's supposed to be a physical laborer, a roofer, so he's getting exercise every day. So if he was only smoking marijuana, I don't think he'd have COPD. Okay, so it was kind of interesting for me to notice that, I had been following him for maybe about 3 or 4 months before I realized that this is kind of like his second go around with the internet and developing a following. His first go around was with the photography world. So he was part of that culture, and he was good at it, and he had some clout, some credibility, and he developed a following on the internet, and then kind of left them. And even kind of said some maybe confrontational things, controversial things, maybe said some upsetting things to that culture, to that world, and even just recently said something very insulting, I think, to the individuals that are really firmly entrenched in that culture, in that world. He said that photography is not an art form. But if you look at Ansel Adams, there is an artistic ability to be able to recognize that's a good photo. Wow, I see this. My son is really getting into photography, and he's got it. He's got a little bit of that natural ability. He likes street scenes in black and white, and like bums and with like neat neon lights behind him, and he's got it. So I think that was a very insulting thing to say against the people that are in this culture that you were a part of. So I mean, why say that? It's kind of like, why say that African Americans have, in rural areas, intelligence in the like below average range? Wow, that's why say that? So I don't know. Okay. So he left this world. He kind of left that culture and jumped into the motorcycle culture. And jumped in. I mean, you saw how he would dress. He looks like, I don't know, kind of like a mixture of like Gentle Ben, like, I don't know, like, I'm trying to think of, when I was a kid, my nickname was Gentle Ben. Or no, I'm sorry, not Gentle Ben, Grizzly Adams. He looks kind of like a mixture of an old biker from the 70s and Grizzly Adams. So when he got into the biking culture, and man, he was always wearing those knives down to his knee. He was always wearing the leather over his pants. He just really got into it, because you'd see pictures of him from a couple years before, when he was primarily in the photography world, and he wasn't dressing anything like that. So boy, when he jumped into the motorcycle culture, So I wonder if this is what he did in the photography world, because in the motorcycle world, he acquired a fan base through utilizing his photography and his like photojournalism skills, and he's a creative guy. So he was able to make these videos with music and neat shots and black and white, and he was able to make some really, really good videos. So he acquired a lot of fans within this motorcycle culture. But then he started to act superior towards them and started kind of segmenting which individuals within this culture that he approves of. So, the windscreen thing, the driving long distance thing, the driving in harsh conditions thing, the working, wrenching on your own bike thing, and started to really kind of segment everyone and say, okay, you're not cool, you're not cool, you're not cool, you're not cool. The only people in this motorcycle culture that are cool are the ones that follow all the things that I'm doing. So, I wonder if that's kind of how he went about the photography culture, because he had a big following on the internet. So I wonder if he just first tried to build a fan base and then started kind of debasing them and segmenting them and saying, you're not a cool group, you're not a cool group, you're not a cool group. And then just basically putting them all down with that last statement that you guys, you're not artists. This is not an art form. Let's get this clear. Photography is capturing what Mother Nature has produced, and that's not art. You're just snapping a button. Very strange to be so into that and to love that as your interest, your hobby, and then to kind of just put it down like that. Okay, so now I feel that he's kind of primarily moving into the political analyst and sociologist domain or culture. But and part of the main reason why I feel this is because he's always kind of been in that ever since he's been in the biking culture and talking about biking things. He's also talked a lot about politics and sociology, but now he won't show his motorcycle anymore. And a lot of his fan base in the comments have a big issue with that and are like, come on, let us see Bertha. Where's Bertha? And he gets upset in these live feeds when people bring it up. He gets upset. Say, yeah, I just took her for a ride this morning. But he won't show her, and she won't be the subject matter of any videos anymore, it appears. Now he seems to want to be moving into a new field, and that is dog breeding. So it causes me to wonder if this motorcycle culture that he jumped into a few years ago is going to be maybe dead in 6 months or a year from now. He seems to, I wanted to say unstable almost, but I don't want to say that. He seems to really just always kind of want to jump into worlds, develop a fan base, and then start ridiculing them and demeaning them and breaking them down, and then moving into a new genre, a new culture, develop a fan base, ridicule, demean, segment, polarize, put down, new culture. So I'd like to see if he's going to be developing a big fan base in dog breeding, and then if that comes down to the same thing, segmenting them, demeaning them, and then moving on to something else. That's kind of what I'm seeing. And now this isn't, trying to ridicule Chuck, because I started, he's intelligent, he's articulate, he's very interesting. But what this is noticing a bit of a pattern here. And from that pattern, being able to kind of estimate what's going to be happening next. So, it might feel really good to him to have a bunch of followers and then be able to demean them all and say, yeah, you might worship me, but I'm superior. That would make anyone feel kind of good, I guess, right? Because you got all these people that adore you, and you're able to say, yeah, I know why you adore me, and you're not that great though. Look at you guys do this, you do that, you do this. Too bad you can't be like me. Once again, that sounds pretty negative and pretty demeaning, and I don't mean to be that way. I'm just trying to analyze him because this is a pattern. And I feel it kind of took place with the photography world on the internet with him. Now it's taking place within the biking world. And he kind of almost seems to be moving on. I mean, how often does he really talk about the motorcycle culture anymore? isn't it pretty much all just about sociology and politics now? He's got a new channel for dog breeding, and so I'm thinking that he's going to keep doing this political stuff and sociology stuff, and this dog breeding is going to be becoming more and more, and he's going to be gathering a larger and larger fan base in that dog breeding world. And then is he going to start, because he himself says, if you want to get into dog breeding to make money, you're not going to be a good dog breeder. If you get into it for the right reasons, you're not going to make much money. So I already see areas where he could really start to attack and demean a large population of this dog breeding culture. Anyways, what do you guys think? Leave a comment.